Hello and welcome to this exploring session, and today we are looking at the resurrection of our Lord, a religious drama in two parts in fragments, written sometime between 1595 and 1545, I was there, say that again, somewhere between 1545 and 1553. The dates vary depending on various problems about what potential source some of this material comes from. You may think, it's all from the Bible, but no, it's a little more complicated than that. And in one of these sources may in fact be the person we've been looking at quite a lot this week, a translation from Erasmus by Nicholas Udall, so which creates some of the potential dating range for the text. It's in two parts, presumably played over two separate days, possibly during the Easter period. Who knows? We don't know. This is also the third resurrection that we've done in the course of the week. We've done a liturgical two liturgical pieces in other sessions, and other resurrection plays are available. So without further ado, we're going to leap into the fragments from the first day's play. We don't know who the first speaker is. It could be either Annas or Caiaphas, but it might also just be random Pharisee in the background kind of person. So I'm going to ask Tamara to read the first unknown speaker.
Which deceived many people all here round about. Yet by the diligent watching of the bishops then, they came both to naught, as no, we shall this man. If we should be more negligent than they were in this, we might both be thought unworthy of our office. Yet first we will make the elders unto this privy, after that entreat Pilate thereunto lovingly.
And whoever they are exits. Scene picks up, or is a separate scene featuring Pilate and a Centurion and various others who may exit or enter at some point. Go Pilate.
If it be thus, Centurion, you make me to wonder.
Yes, and much more so, which I could remember. For though I should lie, which was captain to these soldiers, whom you appointed for the execution of these misdoers, they will testify that when he suffered without doubt, there was great darkness on the earth round about. And when he yielded up the ghost from him there, the veil of the temple divided asunder. The earth shook, the stones brake, the graves opened. So that I said plainly, the Son of God suffered.
What he was or should be, that know not I, but this I know, that they accused him of envy. They laid open crime, never to his charge, but words of blasphemy against their God and usage. And you know how I would fain have delivered him, but that they were so busy on me for the death of him, so that my wife, troubled in her dream at his judgment, warned me for judging against that just innocent, and seeing I would fain have rid my hands of him. But yet they cried with one voice, hang him, hang him. Then least the Jews should have any title against me, because he was named the King of Jewry, and so privily have gone and complained to Caesar, under whom I am here deputy and officer, and for fear of that debate between Herod and me, I might have been wiped so from my dignity. I gave judgment of death upon their accusement, and by washing of hands from his bloodshed, me innocent. How could I pray you, have done more for him than this that I did, to have rid my hands of him?
Yea, your honour doth remember how yesternight last a worshipful senator here was not aghast, boldly to request his corpse to be buried. He judged belike better than all the rest did. And as I understand the man's doing, it is said, he hath buried him in a tomb where never none was laid. Yet would you not grant his corpse with such speed, till you learned of me that he was dead indeed? so that when you heard he was dead so long before, your honour wondered at it, and that marvellous sore.
I wondered at it, for that the bishops, I say, upon a superstition of this their Sabbath day, requested that those three which were condemned might all be hanged, and so down plucked upon their requesting of this their hanging. I thought that this Jesus had been living, had them been living, sorry.
But if it shall please your honour, when the soldiers appointed had those of either side of him there first hanged, when to him they came after to see him dead, they broke no bone of his legs in very deed. For sureness, on thrust into his side a spear, whereout anon issued both blood and water. But yonder comes the high priest again now. I'm sure they are come for to speak with you.
My Lord Deputy, we become to talk with you a few words.
Sit you down and say what you will, my lords.
My lords, we doubt not, but you consider it perfectly how this vagabond is condemned to death most justly. For besides he was both a runagate and a traitor, he was worthier death than any thief or murderer. For he murdered our people in a false belief, and stole them from our law like a false thief. Now because his disciples do credit his doctrine, they me so newfangle and to fantasies incline, yea, mistrusting every word whatsoe'er he did say, even this, that he would rise again the third day. We become unto you here, my Lord Deputy, to desire a watch for his grave's custody, lest his disciples should come privily and steal him, and say he were risen for anger we did hang him.
For all we have done, my lord, were in vain, if he should be stolen away by any means. For the people would believe very well such a tale, and you should not be able to very well to quail the commotion that would rise of such a foolish thing. Therefore it were good to prevent it by foreseeing. Else would this last error put us to more business than it did at first for all our circumspectness.
My lords, you shall not be displeased for nothing, I would say. For in my mind you did not take the best way at what time you forsook him and chose Barabbas, which ever a rebel and a great murderer was. I talked with him alone, as both you here tell can, and ever he showed himself a perfect wise man. And what thing soever I did of him require, he would give a direct and a wise answer, that it was hard for any man any way forth to trap him in any word which came out of his mouth. Therefore, my lords here, methought at that season you were more earnest than was required of reason.
Such fellows, my lord, as mind mischief no doubt, they have a crafty wit to compass it about. For a naughty nature never feels want to study out mischief, is in it so pregnant. But if they would set their wit on all goodness, as they bestow it to invent all ungraciousness, they might be great ornaments to their country and pleasure, and the public weal might have of them a treasure. But as for this fellow, we pray your lordship say, could he deny anything which we to his charge did lay?
What he could or could not, I am not able to say, for he let you say what you would without resistance, aye. But for any wickedness or sin hitherward, you never charged him with it, that I ever heard. And it is not like that he was an evil misdoer, for the country reports that he was a great good doer, and to take his doings to be a sign right good, that he was a man right high esteemed of God. And if it might have stand with your good pleasure, the people through the country had of him a treasure.
My lord, we had our law of Moses the elected, which no doubt of God himself was highly beloved. If he had been of God, the lordship may well know, he would never kick so sore against our law. When we observe the laws of our fathers truly, when would that sturdy knave impeach us of hypocrisy, and to show hatred to the laws of our forefathers? He of purpose kept company with publicans and sinners. Therefore you may receive here a very great likelihood that this man so contemptuous could not be of God.
My lords, concerning the laws of your private God, which Caesar doth suffer you to keep as you think good, is a thing pertains not at all to my office. Therefore, I cannot tell you what your law is. But as for that thing whereto I am appointed, to see true justice amongst you executed.
And here we have the insertion of a stage direction somewhere in this area. Here let the Centurion and his soldiers make sign of valor. This may live somewhere else. Who knows?
Or that no insurrection or rebellion may arise through tumult or gathering or any otherwise, as doth appertain to my office and dignity, as this Jesus, whom you of many things accuse, in suspect of seditiousness by us was condemned. If he were innocent, his wrong is the more. If he were culpable, he hath suffered therefore. Now further, because you do fear sedition, which thing pertaineth into my administration, though there be no cause greatly of any such fear, you shall have your request for the watch there. Centurion, call your men quickly together, that my lord bishops may have their desire. Go now, Centurion, with all the rest, and keep the sepulchre as they shall think best.
And at that point exit Pilate. I wonder when he calls on Centurion, that's when they make the sign of valor. It did sort of vaguely fit with the true justice line, but I'm not sure. So that was Francis reading Pilate. We had Helen reading the Centurion, Alan reading Caiaphas, and Elizabeth reading Annas, and Tamara as the unknown personage at the top of the play. Yes, we're mixing it up as I try to introduce people as we go along, not because I just forgot to do it. No, that definitely didn't happen. So yes, it's quite... the slight risk trigger warning of the probability of anti-Semitism in any of these plays, or something else I should have mentioned at the beginning. We're sort of on the lower slopes of that potentiality here, rather than going full Mel Gibson. So it's interesting to see where that will go. Yes. So general thoughts about where this is in comparison with some of those who were here for other resurrections. And any thoughts so far?
I like the different perspectives that the plays are introducing already. There's a lot of different ones, and I think they're quite good for creating enigma.
There's definitely a debate process going on here, with what's going on between the different parties at this stage. I mean, we don't know how the play opens. We don't know where into this narrative we are. Any additional thoughts? Oh, Lynn.
Yeah, I one thing I noticed, I don't know what to make of this, but a difference between this and the resurrection play that I participated in last week is that this text seems to be concerned with laying out the political landscape in a way that the other text was not. Pilate has this little speech about basically setting up, we have separation of church and state here, that I don't really, Caesar lets you worship your God. I don't know if he's violated your laws. That's not my job. My job is to enforce Roman law. So, I mean, I think that's interesting that that's even a concern here in a religious play, that we've got the political background. Something to notice.
Yes, we and Annas and Caiaphas are giving their arguments for why they have an objection to this prophet that's turned up, and they are given a voice and an opinion, which is interesting. Alan,
I must admit that I listened to this bit, and it's almost like the opening of an episode in a long-running series of This Is What You Missed Last Time. Yeah. It is recapping the pre-crucifixion story in pretty accurate précis of what we get in the Bible. so that the backstory is known.
Mm. Well, it's interesting questions about accuracy of the text to the Bible is going to be addressed by the text itself later on. So there's some interesting things there. Sarah?
It's interesting because I've only done one of the previous resurrection plays, but this seems to be fulfilling a very different function to the one I did. Because that one, it was really only concerned with the immediate followers of Jesus and the emotional toll that his death had taken, and it was like a conduit. I don't know if this one was. I mean, that one apparently was written to be performed in a church.
So
think?
Yes. So
this one maybe not.
The play we're currently doing. I mean, we don't know the auspices, but it feels much more like a more standard kind of possibly designed for outdoor, but maybe indoor performance, in line with earlier mystery traditions. The play we did last time, Christ's Resurrection, was a liturgical drama, so it's very much more designed with the church liturgy in mind. So they are quite fundamentally different beasts. They're doing different things, and I think you're right. This isn't aiming for emotion at all.
No, this is like laying down this is like appealing to the intellect. This is laying down the arguments, whereas that was very intimate and very emotional, and it kind of was there to draw the congregation in. This is serving a completely different function, which is interesting. Same plot.
Yes. And we haven't, as of yet, really in this forum looked at also the wider mystery tradition as well. I mean, this is a sort of isolated beast, and we don't quite know how it fits in there. Well, we have thoughts may appear later. I saw Francis.
Two things. I found the recap of what you missed last week, so to speak, a bit strange. I mean, okay, this is the first resurrection play that I've done, but I just find it odd that there is this recap, because this story, I'm assuming, would have been very well known to the audience.
Yeah, I don't know that it is a recap in that sense. I think it may be there may be an element of that. I think they're interested in the debate about why the things have happened.
Yeah. Okay.
It may also function in that sense. We don't know what happened before it. So for all we know, we've seen the crucifixion and they don't need to recap it. But it may be a totally isolated play and it doesn't actually engage with it.
Yeah. And the second thing is, I just find the language very tortuous. Quite difficult to read, quite difficult to get the sense of some of the sentences and phrases.
It's incredibly difficult. It came to me effectively unpunctuated. I made a random stab in the dark, but it seems to be never-ending subordinate clauses that just run into each other. And the sentences don't seem to ever end sometimes. And it's tricky. I saw Lynn.
Oh, I just wanted to respond to the comment about why are we doing this? What you missed in the previous episode. Doesn't everybody know this story? I mean, everybody knows these stories in part because of cultural products like this. So.
All right. Yeah.
It's not that they're telling the story to people who don't know it, but they are reinforcing the message, or for that matter, tweaking the message. Because I just remind you that if this is appearing orbiting 1550, the question of what is true and what is not is up for grabs. So we can ask what this playwright is trying to do. Alan?
Just a thought, may have no relevance whatsoever. I just wonder whether this was one of the plays designed to be done in the Inns of Court, because it's got a bit of a feel of lawyers muting in terms of setting up legal disputes for discussion, and the question of the difference between civil law and church law as a rationale for discussion.
I think we'll need to look for more evidence in the text for that. We shall see. It may definitely be influenced by that kind of thinking. We've certainly got a rich tradition of debate drama across the board. that might be feeding into this. Let's see what the rest of the plays are doing. I think let's move forward, because I can hear the sky gods are angry in my background. So it's telling me to move forward before I run out of electricity. So Caiaphas and the Centurion and Annas are going to be joined by various soldiers. They may already be on stage. So the first soldier is going to be Tamara, second soldier will be Sarah, Pamela will be the third soldier, and Lynn will be the fourth soldier across this next sequence. So Caiaphas, Centurion, and Annas are having their chat first.
Master Captain, we desire your favour in this our business without displeasure.
As I am appointed, my lords, to this service, so shall it be done without slackness, Iwis.
For slackness herein, or your soldiers' negligence, may be an occasion of greater inconvenience.
Let inconvenience come no other ways unto you, and fear no disquieting of yourselves now.
Then, Annas, first we will here scale the stone, that if it be stirred, it may be known anon.
Verily, Caiaphas, that is a right sure way. So shall it be known if he be taken away.
Now, Centurion, as we may do you pleasure, make the watchmen keep their watch in order.
My lords, put no mistrust in the watch hardly. If watching will serve, it shall not fail of our party.
And unto you, sirs, if you find us not liberal, we will not desire you to watch at all.
My lords, for our true watching, put it out of adventure, if our true watching may do you any pleasure.
You shall please yourselves and us both, and avoid that evil which the wicked about goeth.
Muted.
Right. What evil soever the wicked doth imagine, we be at a point to watch well and fine.
So doing, you shall, my lord, deputy high service, and you shall find us better than our promise.
And what pleasure eft we come to you in any matter, you may be bold on us ever after.
Exeunt.
You're muted.
My turn to be muted. Exeunt Caiaphas and Annas.
My fellows, insomuch as I am your captain now, appointed by my Lord Deputy to see the ordering of you, this is my counsel now, that every man take heed to his watch with all the diligence he can, not to sleep or absent himself else away, when as he should watch and be present alway. For howsoever the matter fall out or frame, do as you should do, and you shall bear no blame.
Master Captain, persuade yourself this thoroughly, that no diligence shall fail upon our part, surely.
So shall you please first, my Lord Deputy, and have great thanks of the bishops truly.
And exit the Centurion, leaving the four soldiers alone.
Are not these bishops, sirs, earnest and stiff, to make so much business about one poor caitiff? Alas, poor man, I dare swear on a book, there's none goes about for to steal him out.
Thou may well call him a caitiff, yea, a beggar. And those which accompanied him were little better, for riches he had none. Therefore it's great folly to make all this business about such beggary.
And I think them not foolish, but rather stark mad. For if he rise again, as they say he saith, I do think the boldest of us four here dare not look of his countenance for very fear.
And if his disciples should come, as they say, and privily by night to steal him away, what probation were that of his words and learning, which they of themselves should make good with lying? Or if he said he would rise within 3 days, they will try his saying, either true or contrary.
And here they fall down as dead in hearing the gunshot of thunder.
Listener's cue.
literally actually got a peal at that moment. Marvellous. I don't know if you came across.
No.
Jesus riseth, throwing off death and the angel.
What a wonder we should be stricken with such fear and dread that we could not stand but fell down like as dead.
I saw one like lightning come down alow with clothes as white as ever there was the snow.
And I was so feared with the earthquake and thunder that I thought heaven and earth had gone together.
He is a sore fellow, whatsoe'er he be, and that shall they prove that resist him, I see. And when on the cross he yield up the ghost, what darkness was there round all about the coast?
And how did the veil of the temple tear asunder? That is made even the priests themselves all to wonder.
At his death I saw great breaking of stones. At his rising I feared the breaking of all my bones. If he be so terrible, as he hath showed here, would the bishops have felt some part of our fear.
But now, sirs, the man we were set to watch here is gone, and all we now cannot tell where. Yet is not he stolen away from us by night, but risen of himself, like a man of might. Let us tell his tale to my Lord Deputy. He will believe no word that we say truly. Again, the bishops obtained this watch alway, lest this man's disciples should have stolen him away. Go and tell them in order every word. They will say we have slept and accuse us to my lord. Let us go therefore out of the way to my house right soon, and there reason in this matter what is best to be done.
Thy counsel in this fellow is very reasonable. Therefore I for my part will be thereto agreeable.
And saying we doubt here what way to take, I will not your counsel herein forsake.
And I feel not my wit so perfect as yet, but that I should condescend to it.
Then let us go, for after our great fear we shall inquired the better seek our answer.
And they enter the appendix read by Helen.
You see, Christ's resurrection, as in the scripture it have. Then note here the nature of malicious envy, which persecuteth innocency, even unto the grave, as these bishops were not stilled with Christ's death only, until they got a watch for his sepulchre's custody. Their corrupt conscience did doubt a party's might, and dread themselves lest truth at length would come to light. Yet this was done by God's wonderful provision, that the more they went about to extinct the verity, the stronger and more perfect they made his resurrection, and proved themselves fools for all their wit and policy. Man's power lets not that which God says once shall be, as you see by the watchman, to a knot of power, to abide the angel's brightness, that fell down for fear. Yet note in these bishops a right honest pretence they had invented to extinct Christ's name. They made Pilate believe that if he were stolen thence, it would make a commotion by means of his fame. Would God there were none such now which doth play the same, which dissuades the people for reading of the scripture, lest it make them heretics, unless they have a doctor. I would call them heretics, in my conceit rather, which can read and may, and yet will not read them, when the word itself doth ravish much better than the words of them do, which do expound it. Therefore I counsel every man to seek his own profit, and as Christ is risen from the dead by his Father's power, so let us rise from our old life to walk a new manner. Now mark the procession of the resurrection,
which we'll do in just a moment. Yes, this appendix is very keen on pointing out this is from the scripture, and if you can read, it is your duty to go back to the book. I think we can safely say we know which side this man's bread is buttered. Yes. I like the soldiers. The things do come alive a bit after the gunshot. I like the idea that Do Thunder were just firing a gun. It may not be how they do it, but that's a suggestion. Throwing off death and the angel. It's an interesting question what's going on there. But I do love the soldiers just going, well, we're screwed, aren't we? We need a plan.
Let's go home and yeah.
We're going to bunk off and get something together.
Get our stories straight.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, lots of hands. Helen first.
Couple of points. The Procurator of Judea is called the Lord Deputy, which is very early modern. Also, I think that at some stage there is an attempt to sweeten the Centurion. Caiaphas and Annas, the bishops, want to give him some money, and he is saying very much, I am going to do my duty.
Yes.
I think he's rejecting it. The soldiers, however, I think are slightly swayed, and I think they're being promised things which I imagine they may be looking hopeful about.
Well, they're probably on a lower pay grade, aren't they? So
considerably, yes.
Honor is for those who can afford it. Alan.
Yeah, I must admit the thought that occurred to me with the 4 soldiers is, well, we're off to the tea room to make sure all our notebooks agree.
Yeah, yes,
and you can also see them form an orderly queue, each seeking to be back of it when they've got to go and pass on the bad news.
Yes, who's going to tell the Centurion to tell Pilate to tell?
After you, Claude. No, after you, Cecil.
Chain of command. Blame it on the Centurion. He left them to it.
No, you can't do that. You're not allowed to blame the officers.
No, but you can arrange for it to make it look like it's their fault. Okay, any additional thoughts before we move into the next unit of action of this first day's play?
The actual resurrection itself is a big deal. And obviously it doesn't have any lines.
No.
But I think that, just that stage direction covers a multitude of business.
Yeah.
Possibly trumpets.
Yeah, trumpets, sound effect. Well, we got a sound effect. There's the question of what's happening with, is there an angel of death being literally thrown off and succumbed at that moment? There's pitched battle potential there. And it's interesting, the soldiers start off by saying, all this fuss about nothing, who's this Jesus bloke? And then after the resurrection, they're going, oh yeah, but there was that whole thing with the temple. The veil, did you hear about that? Oh yeah, no, it was obvious, wasn't it? Sarah first, then Francis.
Yeah, the bit with the angel of death, that reminded me of, there's an Anglo-Saxon poem called The Dream of the Rood, which some of you may know, in which Christ is depicted very much as a warrior hero. He's like a Marvel superhero, Anglo-Saxon equivalent thereof. And it just occurred to me that you could have a really good, even though it's just a one-line stage direction, that could be turned into some kind of almighty spectacle of a sort of combat, one-on-one combat there, with Christ emerging as the heroic kind of virile hero, if you wanted to, because that's very much how he's.
There are other traditions on that of fighting Jesus. We have it in art as well. Of it could be quite physical. Especially with when literally fighting Satan. There's all sorts of possibles there. Francis.
Yeah, I was just wondering, would the resurrection actually have been shown on stage, or is it something that happens off stage with just, I don't know, the sound of the trumpets and thunder and whatever? Yeah, that's my question.
Well, the stage all we've got is stage direction. Jesus riseth, so it suggests. It suggests, but we don't know.
I was just wondering, at the time, would it have been seen as blasphemous to have an actor playing Christ?
No, not yet.
Okay.
No. There's still a long ways to go. I saw Tamara a moment ago.
Well, I was just going to say the fact that there's a stage direction for that specifically says, if that's the original stage direction,
It is,
That
yes.
says-
There are very few additions.
That says Jesus throwing off death and the angel. Then I imagine that we do see that. I picture it as a bit of stage combat potentially. I'm not sure.
Okay, any additional brief things? Helen?
Yeah, we're talking about the fighting Jesus. What we're missing here, presumably, is the harrowing of hell.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
Which is a serious bit of, excitement.
Yeah, but which I suspect this author would not theologically approve of. I don't know how scriptural is it. I don't.
No,
think...
it isn't. It
so
isn't.
so it's
the best bit of the mysteries.
Oh yeah. We've one of the earliest surviving plays we've got is a harrowing of hell, and it's great. Jesus trips Satan on his arse and gloats about it. It's great fun. Coming soon to a podcast near you. Okay, we're going to move on to the next unit of action. So we have Magdalen and the other Marys. We're in the moment going to have Peter and John, and some serious looking is going to happen, like in films where people look seriously into the background while music plays. We'll get to that when we get to that. Okay, go Magdalen, please.
Shall we go now, sisters, as it becometh us, and anoint that sweet body of our Master Jesus?
Are you sure you can go to that place directly, where, as you say, they laid his body?
It is a question to be asked, all right, for he, you say, was buried in the twilight.
There is another thing, sisters, will more trouble us. Stone's grave, both great and cumbrous.
Indeed, sister, we never thought of the stone, else we might have made for that provision. And we be women of a feeble complexion, nor able to stir or remove the stone. But I am deceived, or else I see the stone laid by right handsomely. Alas, dear sisters, that ever I see this day, we be disappointed of this journey. Some envious creature hath stolen him hence, even upon some malicious pretence.
And here we have the entrance of Peter and John.
Hold my box, I will tarry no longer, until I have told this unto Peter. And Peter and John, thou greatly beloved, I bring heavy tiding, which me sore grieved. They have taken my Lord out of his grave, and laid him where we shall never him have. I came to have anointed that sweet innocent body, but alas, sweet Lord, they have disappointed me.
It is not so, Mary.
Yeah, Peter, we will go see.
Alas, sweet Lord, they were very cruel, that would not let thy body lie still.
It is even so, as Mary said. They have taken him away, and where else him laid?
An heinous deed surely, so to bewreak them on his body.
And exit Peter and John.
Was there ever such cruelty as this, that malice with death should never cease? What man was ever so envied or hated, but his malice with death was abated? And cannot thy corpse, sweet Jesus, lie still in the grave for the venom of envy?
Here look toward Jerusalem.
Oh, you envious persons, so devilish, you shall with your malice altogether perish. Could you not be content with your scorning and louting, buffeting, spitting, and all your flouting, and after your scourging to hang on the tree between two thieves in derision so shamefully, and after you took of him there your pleasure, in all thing your malice did you allure, even when you let out there his heart blood, your malice was not satiate with that flood, but that you must burn yet still in envy, and feed your malice upon his dead body.
Here let Mary here lament.
Marie, fret not so in vain at this thing, but stay, I pray you, lamenting.
For you do but consume your heart with heaviness about a thing that is remediless.
We may peradventure hear of it again when we least think of it, and less do complain.
No, Sister Salome, we have lost this labour. They have stolen away my Lord and Saviour. Therefore, I will cast my box away.
No, Sister Mary, keep, I say. It will serve for some other time plain, if perchance we may find him again.
Again, sister? No, no, that will never be. They purpose we shall him never again see.
Yet, ere we return home thus dismayed, let us go to the place where he was laid, and with our sweet ointments his grave, though embalmed.
Yes, we have no idea. No idea. For answers on a postcard for that one. Good luck.
Seeing we have not his body to embalm.
Here do the women go to the sepulchre.
Women, for anything you see, be not affrighted. We know you seek him which was crucified, even Jesus of Nazareth, which was here buried. He is, as you see here, risen from the dead. Therefore mark what we say concerning this matter, and go and tell his disciples it, especially Peter, that he goeth before you into Galilee, and there he will show himself unto you perfectly. Therefore I say, women, be not afraid, for you shall find it true that I have said.
And Mary Magdalene lamenteth again.
Woman, what is the matter, we pray thee, that thou here dost weep so tenderly?
For they have taken away my master and laid him, alas, I cannot tell where.
Whom seek you, woman? The living with the dead? He is not here, for he is risen indeed. Remember what his words were unto you lately, when he was with you last in Galilee. How that the Son of Man should be delivered into sinful men's hands, and so be crucified. And after this rise again the third day, which is come to pass as truly as he did say.
Sister Magdalene, it was even so, as they have told us, therefore let us go.
Yet, Sister Josie, I am not satisfied thus, for if he were risen, he would visit some of us, and except I do perceive more yet than this, my heart will never be at quietness. Love hath so pierced my heart so strongly, that if tears could redeem him, happy were I.
Enter Christ like a gardener.
Woman, what thing is it that makes thee so weep? Or who is it here that thou dost seek?
Sir, because thou appearest to be some gardener.
And 4 leaves of the manuscript are now missing. Just going to pause there because it's always been a slightly tricky bit of the narrative to try and do, because so many things seem to happen for slightly odd motivations, because things happen, people know things, but then they seem to conveniently, if not forget things, but slightly change their perspective on things. And this seems to add more complications to the overall Dadaist quality of this part of the Bible. And I find this really quite interesting. So thoughts on this from the room? I'd be delighted to hear. Helen first.
I think the problem that the writer is having is that he is trying to have his cake and eat it. He's putting all the different narratives from all the Gospels that carry it into a single play, and they are mutually contradictory.
Yeah,
slightly.
I mean, it's not a new problem,
No.
because it's the different times that either the 3 Marys or Mary herself. How many times can Mary lament having discovered that he's come alive? They try and create a psychological motivation for the reason why she starts crying the moment the angel tells her he's alive, but there's there's all these sort of weird problems, and it's weird because I don't think normally they go to Peter and John so early.
No, because
so that's
it's
a really
usually after the
odd
gardener.
bit. Yeah. So I don't know what the appendix is doing here, but sadly we don't have his explication of why he did this. Tamara.
I just also love the fact that, they come on and she tells them and they essentially bugger off again.
There's an interesting question about locality, whether this is performed over separate areas, so that, you know, the whole thing of going to Peter and John is she just goes, I'll go and find them, walks across somewhere else, and not that they enter the scene, but maybe she brings them to, and there's something very weird going on. I like their forward planning, though. I like the fact it starts with a planning meeting. Right, we're going to go to the grave now. Have we got everything we need? Has anyone thought about removing the stone? Bugger. You know, Francis.
The bit where they say, "Oh, we're just weak women. We can't remove this stone. We need a man to help us do it." That made me laugh. But I was wondering, what's this box that Mary Magdalene keeps referring to? Would it have held her, you know, the ointment?
I think that's the logic.
Yeah.
So yeah, Mary obviously has a great line in lamenting Magdalene. That is, you know, she does it at least, you know, and it's presumably quite demonstrative, but it's also very brief. All of these little moments are just sort of exploding, and then we move on to something else. It's very précis. Alan?
I think compared with the resurrection piece we did a few days ago, I find Magdalene more effective in this one because the grief isn't as totally overplayed as it was in that one.
I don't know. I mean, it seems a demonstration here. It doesn't seem internally motivated in the way the other one was. I mean, the other one was excessive, but the liturgical dramas are emotionally excessive. I mean, it's almost their function is to be so. Whereas this is different. I saw a hand for Pamela.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on what you said about the précis thing. I'm really enjoying that it's like almost like a sketch show, and people come on, do their bit, and move on. And so it keeps me interested. Whether it would keep everybody else interested, I don't know. But I'm enjoying that paciness.
And of course, we don't know what the pacing of the performance is and how that functions with so little evidence. We've got a little bit more of this first days to do, so I just want to do that before we say any more. So after the missing 4 pages, we have the follow-up and conclusion of the 4 soldiers narrative. We have one of the additional seniors. Presumably other members of the temple hierarchy. It says, Annas or Caiaphas. We'll start it with Caiaphas because they tend to go back and forth. So let's start it with Caiaphas, and before we get to Annas. So let us begin.
We will buy largely this your good silence, nor you shall not be to be in any fear, my lord deputy, if it be brought to his ear. Our reasons for you shall be of such probation that he shall be forced to credit our persuasion, that so whether tales at any time shall be told him, we will at all times be between you and him.
Your request, my lord, herein is unreasonable, and concerning good conscience surely intolerable.
Of that you seem to fear, set the hurt of our conscience. You shall hear what the Lord doth speak in such doubtings, which requesteth of all men in such scrupulous conscience to suffer a mischief rather than an inconvenience. The mischief is this, that all whole Moses' law by this man's resurrection shall have an overthrow, because it should confirm so plain his form of preaching, that the law with his sacrifice should finish at his coming. Now, when God hath confirmed by Moses our religion, and with 2,000 years hath had his confirmation, it is reason by the juggling of a crafty magister, God's truth should be subverted and brought now to be in vain. For though he be risen, as you report he is, yet all is done by the deluding of your senses. You may suffer then this mischief for avoiding an inconvenience, without danger to your soul or hurt to your conscience.
I trust, my lord Annas, in that your scrupulous sentence hath answered very well for the quieting your conscience. Now lest you should think that anything were done, in all this matter by them two alone. You shall understand that even the whole Senate have conferred together and condescended of late, that if you will say his disciples did steal him, you shall be rewarded fully to the brim.
My lords, if therein we can do you any pleasure, we have the want, you have the treasure.
Then have here this money now for your hire, more than you would ask, wish, or require. Because we require you in more honesty, we bind you unto us with the more liberality.
My lords, because you will have us to spread abroad this tale, that his disciples by night as we slept did him steal. Whatsoever he be that will this deny, we will say, swear yet, and fight for the contrary.
Will you do the like, good fellows, in this?
We will, my lord, perform our fellow's promise.
For he is our mouth, and what that he doth say, we are ready the same for to obey.
And whatsoever he hath promised in all things, you shall be sure to find us no changeling.
Then will we think our money well bestowed, and be sure your friends in every your need.
And they exit, and we are left with the appendix to close this play, or what we have of it.
Here last... Oh. 'Tis me, I think.
Yeah, still play one.
Here lastly you have seen how the bishops redeemed the soldiers' faithful silence with a great piece of money, and made them blaze this lie which they had imagined, that he was not risen, but stolen away privily. This tale they were hired to spread throughout Jewry, whereby in their blindness they're confirmed, I say. The Jews believe none other yet to this day. Now confer the messengers of Christ's resurrection, Mary and the soldiers, and let us taste the mystery Mary told the apostles, which took it for a delusion.
And at this point, once again, we have no more. That is it for the first play, though whether the appendix says that's much more, we do not know. Yes, it seemed. I think that opening speech probably was by Caiaphas, because it's bribing business again, which we had in the first section of this play. So it does seem that Caiaphas handles the money, Annas handles the policy front of things, which fits quite a few other versions of this as well. I like the first soldier. We can do you any pleasure. We have the want, you have the treasure. That's a great line. I like that line. And yet all the other soldiers are happy to go with that. Yeah, we'll take your money. That's good. Good for us. Good for us. I like the word magicianer. A maker of magic. Juggling of a crafty magician, unless I have mispassed that word. I don't think I've changed it. Okay, very briefly, any thoughts about play number one in its fragmentary state? Elizabeth?
I really like the contrast between the soldiers and the women. And it's a shame that we don't have all of the bits that are missing, because I feel like the soldiers and the women will have a bit more to say in this narrative than we've got.
Yes. Other thoughts? Other thoughts?
There is more law.
Mm.
There is more law, more debate.
Yeah. Other thoughts? Before we go for more information. Okay, we're going to go on then to play number two, and it's the second day's play. So these plays are done sequentially in some way, shape, or fashion. And this one, deep dive, people. There are some long speeches, and you're just going to have to battle your way through them. We're not going to pause for you. Just deep breaths, everyone. So we've got an opening inferred conversation starting with Peter to Jesus, followed by the appendix. I will briefly pause after that because there's some interesting things comes out of this little convo. So we've got a different Jesus. I think that's Pamela this time, isn't it? We've got a new appendix coming up. That's going to be Lynn. hence the minis crossover earlier. And Peter, I think, is Helen. So,
what shall therefore, Maester, become of me, wretch, which in all things thus faith and promise doth break?
If thou rememberest when thou deniest me, I looked back, and thou weptest tenderly, which tears I take for full recompensation for thy perjury, denial, and execration. For thou mightest have believed the women by right, for Mary's heart could not have been so light. And for that joy of my first appearing unto you, that mystery as yet is hid from you now. But my foretelling might have been an occasion to have put thee out of doubt of my resurrection. For he which said that would be which thou sayest should not be, in all other was thought to touch the verity. And when we were in Galilee, Peter, did not I then say that all should come to pass, prophesied alway, how that the Son of Man should be betrayed, mocked, scourged, hanged, and buried, and that the third day he should rise again, as all the scriptures affirm it well and plain.
But our wits were so gross, Lord, and ignorant therein, that we understood no word of that saying.
And gross yet it should be, if it were not that I should be taken from you, as I told Mary. But as for thee, Peter, amongst my disciples all, I choose thee head and governor principal, that if they should chance to falter in their faith, thou shouldst confirm them in the ready path, for that thy faith, which thou didst confess, that I was Christ, the Son of God, doubtless, I told thee I had prayed for it unto my Father, that it at no time should fail or alter. But I perceive all my former communication is forgotten of thee, and put in oblivion. Yet seeing the mistrust thou hast laid in me, with remorse of conscience for thy denial of me, I came with my presence, thee here to comfort, that thou shouldest believe me the better from henceforth. Therefore go to thy fellows, and tell them in their heaviness, that I am now risen, as thou canst bear witness. For through the prerogative of thy preeminence, they will credit thy words with more confidence, and bid them believe the women's tales now, for they told them nothing but that which was true.
and exit Jesus.
O perjured person, unfaithful and witless, how hast thou been blinded in all this business? Thou which was always in his conversation, and see his miracles, and heard his predication, and see many things he said come to effectualness. How art thou fallen into such unthankfulness? Thou mayst say, therefore, thou hast a master of mercy, which was no worse displeased with thy perjury, nor took in worse part thy miscrediting the woman's declaration covering his rising. Who could have looked ever for such gentleness, without great embrading of my wickedness? For such is the nature of that his pity, who is well and the fountain of all mercy, whereof I have tasted a draught so good, that all sinners by rule have example to praise God. But now I will go to my fellows in their weeping, and tell them the truth of all the women's saying, how our master is risen and hath appointed me, whom the better they will credit for my seniority.
We now have no scripture doth teach us such appearance as we have made of Christ to Peter in this order, but we must gather this even in the circumstance, both of Luke his words and of St. Paul's together, which both doth write that Christ appeared unto Peter. But with what words, or when, or where, doubtless the scripture shows not. But by that conference of places we conjecture. St. Luke writeth how that after the women had declared how Christ indeed was risen, and how that they were sent to bid them go to Galilee, whereto Christ was prepared, where they alive should see him as he on the cross was rent. Though Peter with the other thought it plain deludement, yet went he to the sepulchre again with doubtful motion, where in the view of things he fell in admiration, in which sure admiration it seems to be most likeliest that Christ should show himself to Peter in his study, but with that other words then it is here expressed. Let them judge, which the doings of other list to try, the order of appearing we judge it kept duly. But this was before that they had, which went to Emmaus, as those words in Luke show, in return to Caiaphas. Then, where have we in Scripture but 2 words of the matter? The rest you must then attribute unto our invention. And though about the thing we can do no more but smatter, let judgment pass of us as we with good intention upon the circumstance have showed our imagination. If it be to your liking, we be right well apaid. And so I now commit you to the rest which shall be played.
Disclaimer, the events you have witnessed are based on actual accounts, but scenes may have been invented for dramatic purposes. Isn't it wonderful? I love that. It's a footnote, walks on stage.
It's a footnote.
I mean, he calls himself the Appendix. My God.
He's a footnote, and he's a good historian.
Mm. It's sort of, that's why I'm thinking there was probably something similar following the all the Marys and the resurrection business, where, you know, all those details of why they did it as they did it, it probably goes through the logic. And I kind of miss the fact we don't have that logic.
That's good.
Mm. I'm not sure there's really much more to say about that apart from it really is fascinating. Yeah, everyone's going to believe Peter, of course, because he's of his seniority, yeah, or because he's a man. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that they don't go into great depth of the actual betrayal by Peter.
Mm. Well, we may have,
that
may be missing at the beginning.
Yes, it's there. If you can find it and if you know what he's talking about. But to a brand new audience, it would seem fairly obscure.
Well, I say that's the thing, is that because we don't have the opening of this play, that may be in there. That may be part of that dialogue between Jesus and Peter, that he actually starts off with a short speech explaining what he did, and then Jesus appears to it, or something along those lines. But from what we've got, you're right, there isn't much exposition, as it were. Alan?
I would have thought that, given that the potential audience for this play would have been effectively attending services very regularly all of their lives, and would have been having scripture rammed at them all the time, that all of the key points in the story would have been, you know, almost embedded. And, you know, all that this needs to do is just to reinforce the particular points that it wants to make.
I'm not sure it is, because I think what this play is explicitly doing is it's trying to explain the bits that are it's trying to explain detail and saying, look, this is the account we've got from the Bible, as opposed to this big picture narrative that you may have been getting for all of your life. You know, you can go back to the book and check this. So it seems to be doing something slightly different to what earlier medieval plays are doing, which is just selling you the big picture and skirting over potential problems. Whereas this is saying, well, this is our sort of reconstruction of this line from the Bible. So I think it's slightly different to that. And that's slightly different. It is a genuine form of education as opposed to just general world building. Francis.
Yeah, forgive my complete ignorance here, but so he's saying, you know, you can check all this in the Bible, but wasn't the Bible in Latin at this point?
We've started getting first English. You know, this is introducing Protestantism to the masses.
Right. Okay.
It's doing what John Bale liked doing.
Right. Okay. But then, how much? What proportion of the audience would have been able to read at this time?
Opinions vary.
Right.
I mean, the play in the first play, it did say explicitly, if you can read, you should do. So there is that element. Lynn?
Yeah, it's very hard to reconstruct the level of literacy. Just listening to a podcast about this last night, I think, where, you know, the reading and writing were taught separately, so we have some record of people who could write, but there might have been a fairly large number of people who could read and not write. So there's that. We also know reading aloud was a much more common cultural practice. So if you had one or two people in your community who could read, they might make a habit of reading aloud a passage from the Bible a couple of evenings a week. We really don't know. And direct familiarity with scripture might have been more common than we have a sense of it right now.
I mean, I like to think of it just my knowledge of Latin is possibly as good as most people's knowledge of written language then might have been. If in that sense, I can pick out some words. I've done a little bit of genuine learning. I could vaguely look at a passage in Latin and go, it's sort of about this. And it might be that if you think about a foreign language. Thinking about a foreign language maybe is a way perhaps we should picture about people's knowledge of written English. Anyway, we need to move forward, and it's quite a lengthy chunk. So any thoughts you've got, we'll whack them in the chat. Deep breaths, everyone, as we have the, I keep wanting to call him Lucas, because that's how the medieval mystery plays always call him. Luke and Cleophas are going for a walk.
Whither now, brother, I pray you heartily?
To Emmaus, brother, if you will anything with me.
Verily, brother, I will keep you company, for my journey that way forth also doth lie. But what make you to sigh and to look so sadly?
The matter which chanced amongst us so lately. When I remember our Master Jesus' conversation, his miracles, his doctrine, and his communication, how the foul spirits ever obeyed his commandment, how the windy storms to him were obedient. I thought little that ever he would have suffered himself so shamefully to have been hanged. For if he had been the greatest misdoer that lived, they could not have handled him more cruelly than they did.
And I, brother, at that, no less than you, do marvel, for hitherto I have taken him for the Redeemer of Israel. For whosoever did note his innocency in his living, with the circumspect answers and majesty in his preaching, would have said that no man but himself alone could have had such gifts as he had many one. And he would many times talk of Israel's captivity, and how his deliverance did draw very nigh, that his apostles strove oft for the preeminence, who might sit next to him in his magnificence. But when the matter framed and came to his pass, that the bishops apprehended him by the treason of Judas, and that he was so spitefully mocked and derided, and lastly to the cursed cross crucified, both his apostles and other disciples all were even discomfited and dismayed with all. Yet his words before his death did move an expectation of waiting for a promise of his resurrection.
But we hear nothing of that. But yet the foolish women came to Peter and said that he was risen, whose saying was counted but fantastical folly. And thereupon I left them and came into the country.
Even so I, for yet I heard no more of his resurrection, thought now to go to Emmaus, half in desperation.
My friends, what communication is this yet you two have had, and talk either with other, and walk so sad?
Jerusalem speaks of our talking, and as thou were newcome and knew nothing, dost thou of us now these things inquire, and knowest not these days what hath been done there?
What be those things, I pray you?
Of Jesus of Nazareth we did talk now, which was a man of great estimation, both before God and man in word and operation. He was a man sure beloved of God, and the people took for prophet of God. This man was condemned of death and crucified by the priests and elders, which him accused. We thought he had been he which was promised, for the redemption of Israel to have been delivered, but that hope hath failed us every dell, by means of that his so shameful death and cruel. For before we took him to be the Messiah, if it had not been for this strange case, yet we thought ever that he would rise again, as before his passion he spake it plain, that the third day he would rise, which is this. But we heard nothing of him yet, but only this, which the women told us, that he should be risen, that the angels reported it to them there then, when with their ointments they went the morning early, in mind to have anointed in the grave his body, wherewith astonied when certain of our company, straightway to his grave there saying to try, where they found severely his sheet and napkin laid. But his body was gone, as the women said. This was the talk we had between us of this good man whom we called Jesus.
O fools and stark dullards that you be, in the understanding of the scriptures truly, why believe you not the sayings of all the prophets, seeing it come to pass so plainly as it is, which all the determination of God did testify, that Christ should suffer all this and so enter to his glory? Thought you that Christ should be a worldly conqueror, and yet his kingdom stands not rather by invisible power? Then am I a better scholar, I perceive, than you be, and did take better heed to his doctrine daily, for you might have perceived, if you had not been carnal, that his kingdom is to be understood spiritual, in executing the office of the promised seed, which should bless us in God and revoke the curse indeed, which curse hangs still over us by our first disobedience, and was expiated by the seed's obedience, and was shadowed in the law with every ceremony, that the seed of the woman should only make us free, and not the work thereof, or any hour sacrifice, for that thing was left to his office. And if you be desirous the truth thereof to know, I will open it to you by the meaning of the law. Moses brought us from bondage to the land of promise, yet was he but a figure there of the true Moses, which delivered mankind out of the devil's thrall, and brought us to the liberty of the law evangelical, where God will be worshipped with a spiritual service, and not with a carnal and bodily sacrifice. Of this Moses, the first Moses plain prophesied, when he promised a prophet of our brethren and kindred, one in all points as mighty as ever he was, whose words he bade mark when it was come to pass. For the Lord had promised he would put in his mouth all his whole mind to be uttered to such, that who to his words gave no attendance should sure for the same suffer God's vengeance. This Moses did prophesy. Now go and confer it, if ever after Moses there were ever man as yet to be compared unto him in all deeds fortunate. But only this man which you speak of elate? Moses brought the law written in tables of stone. Christ brought them written in the heart of man. Moses in the hill talked with God in the cloud. Christ came from heaven, from the bosom of God. Moses from the hill brought the law judicial. Christ on the hill taught the law spiritual. Moses fasted 40 days. Christ did the same. Hitherto between them you hear how all things frame. Moses was the anchor of the old law, I say, which with the blood of beasts was consecrate alway. And Christ was the anchor of the New Testament, which with his precious blood had his consecrament. Moses taught the shadow, Christ taught the verity. Then Christ is even that Moses which the first did prophecy. Moses brought the law, but with much terribleness. Christ came meek and quiet, without any business. Yet this same before Isaiah did prophecy, that he should not cry, or his voice be heard loudly, and that the meek came to call the meek, and turn mourning and sadness into mirth and gladness. Now unto these prophecies compare his own saying, where those which be burdened he calls to refreshing, calling his yoke pleasant and his burden easy, bidding every man learn how meek he was and lowly, and should find quietness unto their souls undoubtedly. Except you would refer this unto Solomon rather, which was a quiet man, and therefore called a pacifier, which built us a temple in Mount Zion gorgeous, and made an order therein most godly and marvelous. But then the prophets say that the law with his ceremonies at the coming of Messiah should end and there cease, and that Jerusalem with the temple should come to confusion because they forsook when it came their salvation. Then this is not that Solomon, which the prophet Nathan promised to David, should possess his seat then. For Nathan promised David of his seat a king, which should build a faithful house and seat everlasting. Then this can agree to that Solomon never, whose house is possessed now of a stranger. And how can you call it a faithful house either, when David was a man-killer and Solomon an idolater? Then this Jesus is this Solomon, the true pacifier, whose blood did reconcile both God and man together, and establisheth the church, his spiritual kingdom, with invisible faith which never shall see confusion. Nor this temple is not, which the Lord did say should be builded, where he should rest forever and aye. For the temple which Solomon built shall be destroyed, and God no more in it shall be praised or worshipped. But the temple which Christ shall build shall reign eternally, and there he shall be worshipped in the spirit and verity. He is a spirit, and therefore he delighteth in the spiritual things as his nature requireth. The church is his kingdom, where he reigns spiritually in the hearts of men with faith, love, and charity. Hitherto I have proved him the true Moses, the true Solomon, which should build the true temple in Mount Zion.
This is a strange doctrine, brother, to us, which we never heard of any our doctors.
No, for whoso speaks against Moses, Solomon, or the temple shall be made an heretic, if he escape so well.
I'll
No.
be kind and just pause you there.
Thank you.
Well done. Don't you just hate it when you get stuck on a bus with an expert? You guys, you didn't get Jesus at all. No, let me explain all the stuff. God, yeah, it's a bit backhanded, some of it as well. You know, you might have perceived if you had not been carnal.
Yeah.
There's some real dissing going on here. He's you know, whew.
Oh, fools and stark dullards that ye be. I mean, it's...
It starts as he means to go on.
Yeah. Yes, for the audience at home, Pamela has now got a speech which is even longer coming up next. Any very brief thoughts before to give Pamela a mini break before we move forward?
It just reminds me of that meme. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it's basically a picture of Jesus preaching, and people are like, when you mean love everyone, do you mean everyone, or do you mean, you know? And he kind of goes, okay, let me start again and tell me where I lost you.
Lynn, I saw a hand.
Just a brief moment jumped out at me when he says Moses, the shadow, and I have the verity. Shades of Plato's cave.
A lot of this is St. Paul, though.
And maybe this is where some of the other source materials coming in as well, but I don't know because I haven't done any research. So maybe. Yeah, it's nice, to take Jesus versus Moses. A lot of doing all the precedent stuff, just pointing out there's a thing we're following here, people. Anything else? No. Okay, Pamela. They asked the question. They did ask this time. So they are asking for it. And, this is a strange doctrine, brother. So I'm getting the impression that Cleophas and they've just not been listening, have they? They've just not been listening. Okay, Pamela. Good luck.
Thank you. Now, hearken to David, how God to him did swear to sit in his temple a new priest forever, not instituted of the law, but of God Almighty, after the order of Melchizedek, as pleased the deity, to offer unto him the most pure sacrifice that could be, even the precious blood of his most precious body, which was shed upon the cross to redeem man's captivity. This is that priest which Helye had in promising, which should do all things to God's mind according, which with faithfulness should build a faithful house and fair, where he should walk before his anointed priests forever. This house is his church of the faithful elected, to God in his blood both kings and priests consecrated. Of his priests in his church, which is his house spiritual, shall be offered a sacrifice of his blood and body mystical, renewing so their bishop's death with a thankful remembrance, which offered himself once on the cross for man's deliverance. With this sacrifice he consecrate the New Testament verily, that it should be a bond of love between him and us eternally. If you do not know this, ask the 12 it rather, what thing it was he institute at the Last Supper, if it were not of that sacrifice of his blood and body, a communion of the elects and a thankful memory. You have heard now how this priesthood is renewed, and how the sacrifice of the law is to be abolished. Thus, Christ's coming from heaven makes carnal things spiritual, the city, temple, priesthood, and the sacrifice withal. Now, if you will compare the prophecies of the Messiahs unto all things now as they are brought to pass, you shall then have no cause to doubt or be offended, but rather to acknowledge him now come as he was promised. The place first of his birth by the prophet is declared to be Bethlehem of Judah and of the stock of David, where doubtless he was born of the same stock and kindred, for his mother was of Judah's lineage. For his mother was of Judah's lineage and of the stock of David. And note, Isaiah's watchword of Messiah's coming well, that a maid should conceive and bring a child, and his name Emmanuel. Though this mystery to the Jews was not known openly, yet it was not hid from Joseph and his company, which Joseph was a witness of this mystery most, that she was a virgin and had conceived of the Holy Ghost. Further, I am sure, concerning his nativity, you have heard of the Magi's, which visit apparently, which both Esai and David long afore did prophesy, of such as should bring presents from Saba and Araby. The slaughter of the innocents did not Jeremy aforehand tell, representing it unto us in the persons of Rachel, bewailing sore her children's death, and would not be comforted to see them all so cruelly of their lives bereaved. And concerning his miracles, both manifold and wondrous, did not Esai write the name in the Spirit most marvelous, that the blind, deaf, and dumb, with the lame and leprosy, should at the coming of Messiah be healed of their infirmity? And all this you saw him do with greater to certain. Why do you not receive him, the prophecies being so plain? Again, when that John Baptist was cast now into prison, and sent 2 of his disciples, and asked of him this question, Art thou he which shall come? He bade then John's disciples go straight to John again, and to him tell his miracles. As who should say, if I tell him not, I am the Son of Man? Let him go to the prophets, and they will tell you who I am. He came into Jerusalem riding upon an ass. Did not Zacharias' prophecy there then come to pass? Lo, Jerusalem, saith he, thy king comes, thy righteous Saviour, riding upon an ass, full meekly and full poor. He that came thus poorly came with no worldly pomp. Yet did he thus subdue the devil's pride and his pomp. Notwithstanding, this is poverty offended the weak ever, so that when he was taken, the 12 him forsook there. And was it not by Zachary long before prophesied, that the shepherd should be smitten and the sheep dispersed? Again, yet what say you now to the treason of Judas? Was it not told before by David how it should come to pass, saying, the man of my peace, which did eat my bread, and whom I trusted well, hath lift up his heel against me like a traitor fell? And the money he was sold for, was it not by Zachary prophesied, how it should, by a field where strangers should be buried, further the conspiracy of them which he accused? Was it not by David plainly prophesied, how the kings of the earth and the heads were all gathered against their Lord, and Christ unto that office anointed, crying, hang him, he is no other worthy, and saved a thief for him, that they might see him die? Now of this accusement of blasphemy was not Joseph a figure, sold by his brethren to the Ishmaelites in great anger, for that his dreams should seem by the interpretation that he should be their Lord, and they in his subjection? And came it not to pass that he, their Lord, provided for them food in that dearth? Or else they must have perished. Even so whom you here speak of is counted of his brethren, to be but a blasphemer, for whom yet God did ordain that he should be their steward, and even their sole provider for food in that great banishment which their soul should suffer. What say you to his silence in his examination? Did not Esai and David both make thereof demonstration, likening him to the sheep led unto the slaughter, and as still as the lamb which lieth before the shearer, he was scourged, scorned, drowned with thorn, and spite upon, and showed to the people to make a laughing stock upon? Here Esai, in the person of the people, as he might, doth prophecy and lament that most dolorous sight, saying, we did take him only for a castaway, and is clean given over of his God for alway. But he was thus wounded for our faults rather, and his wounds had healed us now forever. If he were thus wounded for our sins by Esai, then it must needs follow that Messiah must needs die. If he must needs die, then the scribes and Pharisees have deceived themselves with their false glosses, which believe and teach like most vain deceivers that the Messiah shall not die, and so makes the prophet liars. Now the carrying of the cross did not Isaac figure likewise, which carried the wood himself unto the place of sacrifice? Yet further in the law did not the brazen serpent, his hanging on the cross, unto us plain represent, that whoso looked upon him with the eye of faith should be cured of the serpent's sting, his sin, and be safe. Also the grave and stone, was it not touched of Jeremy, which in his person saith, in the lake they have cast me, and further besides that they have laid a stone upon me. Again, in the grave, that he should not there putrefy. Doth not David in his person speak it plainly? Thou shalt not leave my soul in hell any season, nor suffer thy Holy One either to see corruption. Further, concerning his resurrection, hearken how the Jews desired of him some token. Who answered, you shall have none other token of me, but even Jonas 3 days kept in the whale's belly. How would you require here a more plain figure to declare his resurrection, or more true mirror? Jonas was cast in the sea to pacify the tempest. Christ was cast from heaven to the earth to bring man to rest. Jonas swallowed of the whale was cast out the third day. Christ was buried in the earth to rise again the third day. According to the saying of Asai, which spake thus, after 2 days he will revive us, and the third day raise us. Here now you have heard all things now come to pass, which were ever shadowed or prophesied of the Messiahs. His kingdom, his priesthood, his birth, his poverty, his preaching, his miracles, his passion, as you see. Why do you stand in doubt then of his resurrection, having of all the other things so fair approbation? But be you asleep and possessed with drowsiness, that you can neither hear nor see the scriptures witness? Else you might have believed the women lightly, which told you he was risen, and that they did him see. Oh.
Don't worry, Jesus. You get to slake your thirst with some bread in a moment. So we'll just finish the scene off as we take a breath from that. So Cleophas and Luke respond to that wonderful, slightly beratey speech.
How say you, brother? Was not this a good scholar, which did take so good heed to his preaching ever?
Yea, brother, for none of his apostles, whom he chose chiefly, did ever record his doctrine unto us so plainly. Therefore we may be called fools and stark dullards, all, which took so little heed to his doctrine evangelical.
Yeah, and this is to me a wonderful strange thing, that he could never with all his plain teaching drive out of our heads that false understanding we conceived of old of the scribes and Pharisees learning. But we come to the town. We will take up our inn here.
Then God be with you, for I must go further.
Nay, sir, we have had good communication of you. With your leave, you shall not depart from us now. Therefore we pray you tarry, for you shall fare as we fare, and the night draws on apace, and you cannot go far.
Seeing needs you will have my company, I am content to tarry.
Yea, God send me such company whensoever I travel, that will pass forth the time with such godly counsel. I have had through Jewry many a sundry walk, yet in all my journeying I never heard such talk. Therefore, sir, you are right heartily welcome to our company, and I pray you, let us enjoy it as long as may be.
Brother, if it might stand with his good pleasure and will, would God he would tarry and continue with us still, for he did our master's doctrine much better regard than any of us all yet that ever I heard. Therefore, sir, we do here pray you heartily to think yourself welcome unto our company. Sir, here is such a poor pittance as we are able to prepare, but take in good worth, we beseech you, this poor fare.
Whatsoever it be you set before me, I will accept it right thankfully.
And here Christ takes the bread, break it, and gives it unto them, and so suddenly departeth. Luke and Cleophas here, they make gestures of wonder a while.
He is gone.
He is gone.
Gone. That's weird. Okay.
Yes, it's weirdly, I apologise, it's weirdly laid out because those two lines are actually side by side in the text, in the way they're laid out. So one's asking a question and the other one's just saying, gone.
Huh.
I don't think it's actually one responding to the other, but in performance you might decide differently.
Or maybe we're talking at once.
Yeah, I think that's the idea, is that, or it's that thing. One is asking a question, one is just going, whoa, which is interesting. Anyway, let us finish the scene.
Then I do perceive it was our Master Jesus that hath opened the scriptures so pightly unto us. I wondered that any disciple he had should be so perfect in those things which he said. But how chanceth it with us, I pray you, good brother, that it was so long ere we could know our Master, which dissembled with us so long in his talk, that he never uttered himself in all this long walk?
Brother, did you not mark where he the bread did break? how with words of thanksgiving, ere ever he it brake, did first bless it, and after to us reached it, even as he was wont to do before he suffered. Upon the sight whereof my heart did give me in suspicion of his talk, that it was even he.
And I, upon the sight of that his former usage in breaking of the bread, and devotion in his visage, which he always accustomed in like his other feeding, had my eyes opened unto the full acknowledging of his person to be the same which hanged upon the cross, even as the opening of the scriptures shows that he was.
Surely, brother, we were asleep and did slumber. Or else his communication did show him us much better, in that his much discourse he made so plainly, by Moses, the prophets, throughout so orderly, concerning his birth, and preaching too of his passion, with the testimonies thereof also of his resurrection, and showed him thereby another manner Messias. And the scribes and the Pharisees have declared to us and showed that through weakness, death, and misery he must first pass, and so enter to his glory. And his conference was made with such spirit and such grace that it would have forced any man to acknowledge him Messias.
Yea, we might have acknowledged that if we had been happy. For how did his talk ravish us all inwardly? For myself, I can say all the time of his talking, my spirits were ravished and rapt with the hearing, that I could have been glad if it had been his will without meat or drink to have heard him talk still.
Sure, if it did with you as it did with me, you were never in such case with any talk before. It pricked, heated, inflamed, and ravished us. It kindled and set afire our hearts within us. The preaching, I say, of the scribes and Pharisees is faulty and cold in comparison of his.
Now let us dispatch our business anon, that we return to Jerusalem all soon. For me, think the time very long we tarry till the apostles of this matter be made all privy.
For hearts annoyed, freaked with desperation, would be right glad of any consolation. Therefore, dispatch anon all your business, that we to Jerusalem may with all speediness.
And they exit. Enter Appendix.
Christ here, as you have seen, appeared as a stranger to two in doubtful hope, expounding all the scriptures of Christ, how he should die and rise of death to conquer, that man thereby through faith might enjoy those treasures of pardon, grace, and favor, and all those heavenly pleasures laid up in store for them which will not be offended. At that strange form he comes for us to be amended. As sickness, hatred, want, banishment, and persecution by strange forms, as we think, for Christ to appear unto us. But if that we give ear unto that consolation, the gospel shows therein with promises most joyous. Christ in his proper form will show himself eft most marvelous, in form of life and health, had by his resurrection, that no doubt shall remain concerning full salvation. In such forms he tries out, even by our own confession, the secrets of our hearts, our faith, or infidelity. Then cures he our foolishness, our sloth, and doltish reason, with all the words of God, which speaks of his true glory, and makes us apt thereby to request his company. Here, where breaking to us bread, the food of true salvation, he shows himself plain Lord over sin, death, and hell's poison. And further, we may learn by these good men's example that in all doubt of our faith, how simply for to talk, as doubting, not denying, in fear and yet unstable, they had therefore the truth revealed in their walk. So, if within our hearts there be no self-willed dark, Christ will by some strange means the truth unto us open, and the warmness of the Spirit shall thereof be token. Now lastly, how that Christ here, whom death could never hold, was holden by the prayers of those two simple persons, teaching thereby how we, by prayer, may be bold to make Christ tarry with us by inward secret motions of truth and godly life, aye, pointing faithful lessons. If we be then in prayer earnest at all season, we shall then doubtless feel the fruit of Christ's passion. For the word teacheth how prayer should be used, and prayer obtaineth that the word hath promises. Now I will keep you no longer from the rest of the matter.
And exit, and that essentially closes a lot of that unit of action, though it does overlap into the next. So if you didn't get all of what Jesus said, don't worry, you got the York notes following immediately afterwards. Luke, fascinating. Yeah, Jesus, he really got me going. You know, we never understood the scriptures before. And Cleophas's line about, it's really weird that after all hearing all his teachings, I still kept getting confused with what the Pharisees said. It's like, it's so difficult to be good, man. All that stuff. It's a big old ask, this one. I mean, this is the only bit we've got that is pretty complete, actually. All the other bits we keep getting cut off. But we got this chunk. General thoughts. Stunned silence.
Any chance some of it could be cut for performance?
Well, it's one of those problems. It's not so much of where do you start, but where do you stop? There's so much of it. I mean, it's fragmentary as it is. So what you do with it in performance is really debatable anyway. I mean, it's not like we could do it authentically. So cutting is sort of almost, it's already pre-cut in a weird way. So Francis.
I was thinking about during that long speech of Jesus. I was just thinking, if you're an actor playing Luke or Cleophas, I mean, what you do standing there listening to all of this, your legs would be aching at the end of it because you're just not able to move. I mean, what would your inner monologue be and all of that?
Yeah. And are they walking? Are they sort of going and doing a circuit? What's physically going on? Alan?
Yeah.
I think it would have to be done walking, because I think the story, as I remember it from Sunday school few years ago, is that this was on the road, and they're travelling companions. So it would need to be done promenade style to fit with that.
Especially as Cleophas has obviously read the scriptures, because he says so. So that's fine. Tamara.
No, I was going to say the same thing. It's just they have to be walking with Jesus. I mean, I guess an argument could be made, but that might just be the little chaos voice in my mind, that they could find things to do, like eating an apple while they're listening and things like that. Certainly, they wouldn't be sitting down playing cards while he's got that big speech.
Okay. Yes, Helen. Oh, no, Pamela, sorry.
Sorry, I just had one really quick question. Is it literally just when he breaks the bread that they work out who he is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. For your best mates, that's going well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And again, we've come across characters who ain't exactly bright.
They're very slow on the uptake.
Yeah.
Magic.
To be fair, I mean, lapsed Catholics, so this has been a while ago, but as far as I remember, it's just, there is a glamour on, it's to be understood that he doesn't look like himself until he reveals himself.
Like the gardener earlier with Mary, which we didn't get into, though she did sort of suspect, because you appear to be a gardener, I will continue talking to you. And then the text cut out. Lynn.
And the disguised god is a common trope in Mediterranean/European mythology. So the god you don't recognize him until he's ready.
It's like with Odin, there's a random one-eyed man. Who could that possibly be?
Helen.
Yeah, I think it raises the question of who the expected audience was here, because it is such an enormous speech and so very much theology. It's all how the coming of Christ has fulfilled all the scriptures, one after another. All the prophecies that have ever been in the Old Testament are fulfilled in the New. And although it does seem to me that we're not talking about your average parish audience.
I don't think that's probably accurate. A lot of mystery plays do exactly this kind of game. Not necessarily
At
this play.
length?
Yes. You will have
fair enough.
ridiculously long genealogical plays where they'll go into deep depth. The Alan may remember when we did the Chester prelude to the Antichrist. There's a whole dream diary explication sequence about future prophecies of the end of the world. They're quite capable of doing the full sermon randomly, and Jesus can be incredibly boring in other plays as well.
That was the Root of Jesse play, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, well, that's one of them. But in Last Supper, he can go on and on and on. Bless him.
This is a bit like Krishna in the Mahabharata, where he talks for about a week without drawing breath.
Anyway, we've got the option now just to do the very, very last sort of scenettes of the play. Are we happy to power through? We are technically in extra time.
Should only take... I am.
Excellent. Okay, so the appendix is exited. Cleophas and Luke have well, I don't think they've quite made it back. We'll find out what's going on in a moment. So, Cleophas and Luke.
Were we purpose, brother, to have tarried all night? We will to Jerusalem again, all right, and show them in order how it chanced with us. Peradventure the apostles will yet believe us.
They would not believe for this cause the women, for that he should appeared, they thought, first to the men. But for that they do know how we departed from them. They will better believe that thing we shall tell them.
Then let us go apace, lest we be nighted.
And exeunt is the direction.
For I trust we bring glad tidings to them, all befrighted.
Here they walk aside, and Peter with the apostles comes in.
And is our master risen indeed, Peter?
Indeed, John, as I told you the matter.
Then the women did tell us a true tale.
Every word was true, they said, without fail.
What misbelief was in our hearts then, that we could never credit the women, but counted their words therein fantastical, when only the fault was in us all.
We thought, if he rose from death again, that we had been they whom he first plain, would have showed himself to all throughout. And that was the thing lapped us in such doubt.
Then, Peter, we will all believe thee, for that thou sayest he hath appeared unto thee. For thou wast in the same doubt with us, in like despair, and conscious, scrupulous.
And James number 1, please.
And I know that Peter could not say it, unless it were true and to be credited. But who be yonder which comes so apace? Be it not they which went to Emmaus?
And brethren, welcome, for since you are here, we know what has become of our master. He is risen from death, as the women said, and appeared to Peter when he was right sad.
We be glad of that. You shall hear now again what chanced by the way unto us twain, as we went to Amos, hardly in despair of his resurrection, as all you hear were, and making our moan concerning the matter, he appeared unto us by the way like a stranger, and reproving our dullness in all things and doubt, he expounded the scriptures of Messiah throughout, and proved by them that he must needs die, and so for to enter into his glory. But when we came to Amos, he feigned to go further, yet we did so entreat him that he tarried with us there. then by blessing, breaking, and reaching the bread to us.
And there we lose another 2 leaves, and we jump straight to who is probably the appendix. So, Lynn, back to appendix duties, mid-flow.
This third is of spirits, if there be such or no, whom Christ here doth deny to have flesh or yet bone, and thereby Christ doth affirm, but not to believe this thou, that they in fleshly forms do walk as many one. Affirm that they have seen them as they have rid or gone. Those be but lying spirits, delusions of the devil, to tempt us in our faith and draw us unto evil. And though we see Christ eat in sight of his disciples, it argues not, therefore, that our immortal bodies shall be sustained with meat or other carnal trifles, where generation ceases and all these worldly studies. And whereas we shall be as the angels in all glories, but this was a prerogative for a plain demonstration of a right natural body after resurrection. And here I leave again at this season until further matter give further occasion.
And we
Brethren.
Yes,
Sorry.
and Peter, we return to the scene with Peter and all the disciples. All disciples remain on standby. Do leap in. If you don't leap in, I may leap in for you.
Brethren, you know how the scribes and Pharisees do watch and make search for us with all policies, and all is to find against us some matter for that great hatred they bear unto our Master. Therefore my counsel is we get us to Galilee, if there peradventure we may be more privy. And since we see our Master, this is the 8th day, and here we have lain in great fear all way. And for that we fear now to go out by light, we may with more secretness convey ourselves by night.
Enter Thomas at some point around about here.
We be ready, Peter, to do what you wit, either to go or else to tarry still. But yonder comes Thomas. I am sorry that he hath lost the sight of our Master so unhappily. Thomas, I pray thee, when thou wast last from us, what was the cause thou so departed from us?
And Thomas, have I accidentally not given out a Thomas? It looks like I didn't actually give anyone Thomas.
Shall I read it?
Go for it.
I had business to do which I could not defer, and yet for all that I am never the near.
If thou hadst tarried with us altogether, thou shouldst have seen and have heard our Master.
You may long tell me that tale all way, before you can make me believe it, I say.
Dost thou think, Thomas, we jest with thee, and that John doth not tell thee the truth verily?
I think you disposed with words so wise to bring to me to some foolish paradise.
Thou deceivest thyself, Thomas, for to think so. For we jest nor mock thee, neither to nor fro. For all we saw him in the same self body, as I told you before he appeared to me. If I lie, sirs, you can all testify it. Was it so or no that Thomas may believe it?
Thomas, the very same body which was hanged on the cross, we saw but more glorified than before it was.
And that thou shouldst marvel a great deal the more, he came in, the doors shut, never heard of before.
In that we did take him for a ghost at first sight, till he spake and told us who he was all right.
Yea, we doubted as yet for all of his speaking, until with eating he put us out of doubting.
Oh, that's me, sorry. Then afterward, Thomas, as he was wont to do, he preached unto us of many things too. I was waiting for Cleophas.
And opened the scriptures concerning the Messiah, how all things before written are now come to pass.
And opened our eyes that we perceived well that he was the promised Saviour of Israel.
And for the understanding of the scriptures, more surely he breathed in us his spirit, for this now our captivity. Francis.
And authorized us therewith to our office again, to bind and loose sins by preaching both twain.
How sayest thou now, Thomas? Can this be a leasing, when as all thy fellows do affirm all one thing?
All my fellows, and you also, Peter, may be deluded with some fancy or vision which you have mistaked.
If we be deluded, Thomas, in this, we will never believe from henceforth our senses. Dost thou, Thomas, believe that I am Peter, which talkest with thee now, and whom thou dost hear?
Why should not I believe it when I do thee see, in the self-same likeness, wherever I knew thee?
And we saw our master in the self-same likeness. He hung of the cross and was wounded, doubtless, and offered his body to us all to feel him, that feeling his wounds we should not doubt of him. Thou art therefore, Thomas, far out of the way, to think three of our senses so far beguiled, I say, which would not have us to believe anything which we saw, heard, and felt without doubting. Therefore thou makest us all here to wonder what should be the cause of this thy great error.
Francis.
What's the cause? But even more wilfulness, to take opinion of self-while foolishness.
Then, Andrew, I say it is a mad opinion to be thus bent so strong against all reason.
That head which thinks his own reason the best, on most part with fancies, is all possessed.
Fancies indeed, as proved now in Thomas, which lets that to truth he cannot give place.
A truth without witness is for him most fit for witnesses, I see that he will not credit.
If witnesses do stand upon a number, I think we were sufficient witnesses here. But Thomas with himself allows no witness, but such as herein shall be even all senseless.
For that thing which of us was felt, heard, and seen, will not sink in Thomas his head by no mean.
And when you have said, sirs, all that you can say, you cannot all make me believe it, no way. I will not credit, no, not my own eye, though I should see him stand here before me, unless that I see and feel both those wounds made in his hands and feet with those hellhounds which nailed him to the cross, without fear or dread of their cursed fact and most heinous deed. And further, I will not believe my own sight, unless with the sight that also I might even plain have my hand in the wound of his side, which was made with the spear both large and wide, except I do see this in proportion. I will never credit his resurrection.
Thou makest us marvel to see thee so stiff, or what things should make thee so hard of belief. For though we all at first did doubt in the matter, yet were not we so stiff to continue in error.
Stiff or unstiff, you cannot all turn me before I see and feel the wounds of his body.
The peace of God be amongst you. Thomas, because thou art here so hard of belief, and against all thy fellows stand in it so stiff, that thou wilt not believe yet my resurrection, for all thy fellows hear their testification.
Yes, because Jesus has gate crashed the party and, not impressed. So really weird. I mean, I say weird. It's that thing about Thomas of being, it's not just, I've got a little bit of the doubt. I don't trust your senses. I don't trust most of my senses. I mean, it's going beyond an existential crisis. He's getting to the point where he just doesn't believe in anything. And, how do you live your life, Thomas? I mean, seriously. So that's interesting. It's one of those problems. There are so many disciples all randomly talking. Most of them, they're interchangeable with other people. Alan?
I view Thomas as being a scientist. Until I've seen something I don't believe.
Yeah, but it's not even that he needs to see it. He needs so many points of reference of proof that it gets to the point where he can't really believe in any objective reality.
That's good science.
I've got the impression that, you know, no matter how many data charts you show him the existence of Jesus, he's not gonna buy it. I mean, we don't have the end of the play, so for all we know, he shoots. You know, he takes out this imposter and says he's not the true resurrection.
Yeah, like that's going to happen.
I don't think that happened, to be fair. Okay, we're very much into extra time. So, final thoughts. Anyone who needs to rush off first, dive in. I'm not rushing away, but I appreciate other people's time is perhaps more precious. Otherwise, I will just go around the room in a fairly random fashion. Tamara, final thoughts.
Well, unlike others, this is my first resurrection. So, sorry, I had to. And I, other than the pieces that are missing, I quite enjoyed it. I have to say I did get some flashbacks to Bible class, but, you know, in a good way. I do think there is something from a modern perspective, from my perspective, to be said about the fact that they keep bringing up the fact that nobody believes the women. Quite funny to me. And that stuck out. I kind of like the idea of Jesus not waffling, but feeling a little bit waffly in places. And yeah, I actually really, really enjoyed it, and I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much.
It's really interesting that, you know, it is a play that is actively trying to figure out how do you, almost from scratch, how do you dramatize these disparate accounts? You know, the medieval tradition has sort of figured out the story they want to tell. And this going back to the sources approach creates problems, but also really nice things that I'm really quite interested in. I love the appendix. I don't normally, these expositors I don't normally like, but the fact he's showing his working, I quite enjoy. I think there's something interesting there. Lynn, final thoughts?
Something I didn't say after the appearance of Jesus to on the road, and those two long speeches that he has. I noticed that both of his disciples said, "Oh, I was absolutely riveted. I was ravished." It was so it. It's almost as if the text is trying to like justify itself, but it also sort of reminds me of the beginning of the tradition of charismatic pulpit preaching and how important that is to the Protestant tradition. So maybe this is our first sort of foreshadowing of that. It's the charismatic speaker who can rivet an audience for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour at a time. Maybe we're seeing that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that in some of John Bale's plays. You know, that he opens and closes them as himself, as you know, as a preacher. And yeah, maybe there's a lot in that. I think there's a really good point. Francis.
Yeah, it was my first resurrection play, so you're not alone, Tamara. And I also had flashbacks to Catholic Church services at Easter, which I used to hate. I preferred Christmas. Yeah, it's hard work, this play. I mean, contemporary audiences must have been staggering out of this thing at the end. Yeah.
It's an interesting question of actually how it's staged and whether there's room for selective inattention. That, you know, if it's outdoors, because it suggests that there's some level of movement, that drifting off is okay because you can physically distance yourself from what's going on. Genuinely have no idea how this might have been staged in comparison with other conventions. It's really hard to say. I think that seems to be, there's something about the verse style that does seem to be really tongue twisty at times. It's not flowy in the same way as others are. I think it's one we could lock into with obviously more time. We are doing a very rushed session. We would normally do this in 2 sessions. Anyway, Pamela, final thoughts.
I'm also new to the resurrections, also having flashbacks to childhood. I did like that they regretted that they had not believed the women, so that made me happy there for a moment. Yeah, as an actor, I think it would be hard to, that's an awful thing to say, isn't it? Hard to keep people interested for that long, but yeah, it feels like quite a big ask for someone to be able to do that speech, or those speeches. Do them justice, I guess.
Elizabeth, final thoughts from you?
It's the first play of this kind I've read, and I thought Jesus did preach a lot. I think it was very heavy. I think Pamela did it very, very well, but it was very heavy. And I thought that when the soldiers were speaking, the action was moving quite quickly. But by the time we went through the road to Emmaus, the action slowed down considerably. And that made the play heavy for the audience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wonder if that's deliberate. Is, you know, play number one's full of fun. Come back for play number two. Play number two, and now, and I've written on the top of my script, sermon alert is the words I use. It just goes. That's what we're doing now. That's what we're doing. Live with it. You know, go with it. Because if it is play two and they're not doing another play, well, you can leave now. But hey, what can you do? Sarah, final thoughts.
This is not my first resurrection, and it's probably unfair to compare the two because they were made for different reasons. But I'm going to nevertheless, because I think if you were going to stage one to a modern audience, you would want the liturgical version, because it just has so much characterization in it and so much depth of emotion, and it reaches out of the text and grabs the audience and just doesn't let go of them. And I mean, I was thinking about not in the resurrection, but there's that huge speech of Mary's in Christ's burial, which is like part one, that we did. And I mean, that does go on too long again, and it has a weird breast fixation as well. But it is still really gripping. I found it so anyway. And I just think it's if you were going to stage, one of these resurrection life of Christ cycles, that maybe a liturgical one would be the way to go. But there were things I really liked about this. The appendix reminded me of that. Do you remember that little paperclip dude that you used to get on Microsoft?
You are trying to do a biblical narrative. Would you like some help?
Would you like some help? Yeah, you reminded me. And I also actually really liked the way after you had that massive, tour de force from Pamela, that massive speech of Jesus, you then suddenly cut to the, or did we have pages missing? Maybe that's why we cut. To the fact that the disciples were all like talking over each other. And I don't know, it just occurred to me that the author thought, well, okay, I've done the big sermon, I've done the bit that I've needed to do, now I need to wake them all up again, so let's just have them all like going at each other, and it suddenly picked up loads of pace. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I quite like the detail of Luke and Cleophas of just going, right, well, we were leaving the city, but now we should go back. Shall we stay overnight? Is there a travel lodge? And then the appendix appears, and then it's afterwards, right, well, we should be making our way back now. And then when they get there, it's like they're about to say, we've got news, and Peter just goes, yeah, we know what you're about to say. And it's just like, oh.
If I'd read ahead with this play, it suddenly dropped into my head halfway through when we were doing it. Tamara, we should have done Bill and Ted for those two.
Yes.
Next time.
Actually, yeah.
Helen, final thoughts?
Thinking of what Lynn said, the preacher in Hull in the 1560s, we know from a court case, never ever preached less than 2 hours, usually considerably longer. So they were used to sitting through an enormous amount of exposition.
Mm.
And the other thing is that all the way through with this play, far more than others that I've done, and I haven't done much of the early stuff, I was conscious of the rhyme scheme that we weren't obeying. The rhyme seemed to make us want to hit the final syllable and make it rhyme. The rhyme scheme seemed to be actually dictating the way we spoke, and we were all fighting it.
Yeah. And when we do
that is interesting.
Yeah, we especially with medieval stuff, I do tend to say what you see, follow the rhyme as best you can, even if the word sounds strange. So people are trying to change than to then at times and things like that. That happens quite a lot when it's supposed to rhyme with an and sound. We do get a lot of that. Alan, this is not your first resurrection. I don't think it's even your fourth.
No, I've been around the block a number of times on these. I would describe this as being a curate's egg. I think actually there would be an interesting exercise maybe to take the one we read the other day, the one with Magdalen or Magdalen being very, very maudlin. I liked the first section of this one because I felt there was quite a lot of dynamism in there. And I think the final 3 pages or so that we got, the disputation between the apostles and Thomas being a proper doubting Thomas, worked quite nicely. An awful lot of the sermonization exposition, well done to Pamela get through that enormous speech. But quite honestly, I would not be too concerned if I never heard that again.
I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, for a start, we shouldn't really be talking about it as a play. It is 2 plays that we happen to have crammed into one session, which was not the plan, I should point out. And that it is doing fundamentally different things to other versions of biblical plays that we've got. I mean, there's been an awful lot talking about the Christ's Resurrection liturgical drama, which I think is probably the last play anyone in any other context would discuss this play in connection with, actually, because people generally don't discuss those liturgical plays. They're sort of just quietly left in a corner and forgotten about. Most people would probably immediately leap to the mystery plays that we have in the various different versions that we have, of which this is doing something fundamentally different, even though there are lots of crossovers and familiarities, and that ability to just hand Jesus a massive speech. We only really have one bit of this play that functions as a unit of action, and that's the Lucas and Cleophas sequence, and that's the bit with the most texty of text. And yeah, it's a fascinating technical challenge, and I do wonder if maybe we could have got more out of it if we had a bit more time. We could have stopped and started and looked at that and see what the potentials were. I suspect probably not. And it is a shame that we don't have more of the rest of the overall structure of the play. There are other plays sort of outside of cycles and outside of this medieval biblical framework, which are doing interesting things, which the slightly fragmentary nature of this sort of fits into, and I kind of want to try and piece some of that together again in the future. Francis, you have
just one quick question that occurred to me. We didn't have the ending of the second half, so I was wondering, based on your experience with other resurrection plays, how would it have ended?
Which play are we talking about? Play 1 or play 2? They both don't have an ending.
Sorry, play 2.
What happened in play 2? Doubting Thomas Jesus would probably, off the top of my head, just say, see you in however many days, people, for the next visitation, and they'd probably say a prayer and be really happy. I mean, it depends whether they transpose it with other elements. He might eat with them as well. Again, it's that question of which part of the Bible are you crossing with other bits, and what happens when. That might have happened earlier, depending on the version. But yeah. Alan, I'm aware time is passing.
Yeah, it feels to me like there's probably only one page missing at the end.
I'm sure they could try harder. I'm sure they could try harder. But yes, there isn't much.
That's all folks see at Pentecost.
Yeah. It is also an interesting problem of actually what do you do with the biblical narrative after the resurrection is sort of the main resurrection-y bit is done. That the narrative gets so diffuse that mystery plays tend to slightly lose the plot a bit, because there isn't really a plot. It's a plot of disparate actions, and it becomes much more preachy generally, in a way that earlier plays are not as actively preachy per se. They can actively, do a sermon. Because you've got Jesus, and you've got Jesus, he should do some sermonizing. Really, that's kind of his USP. Anyway, yeah, Helen.
The things I've seen, when I've seen them done as cycles, it does tend to zip fairly fast. After Pentecost, you've got the death of the Virgin, or the Dormition, if you want to be technical. Possibly a coronation of the Virgin, if you want to be non-biblical. And then you move very smartly to the Last Judgment, where everybody's happy. Because all the baddies are getting theirs.
Well, or you get the in Chester, you get the Antichrist plays, and trust me, they're Tamara would love them.
I don't know these.
There's zombies. There's an apocalypse. There's massive sword fights. Everyone dies. They come back alive again.
That sounds like something I would like.
It's on the podcast. We did a read through of it a couple of years ago now. God, is it that far back? At least 18 months. And and the prophet's play before it is seriously someone's just opened their dream diary. They're reading random bits out to you, and then someone has to come on stage and says, "This, ladies and gentlemen, is what all these things mean." And you're sort of going, it's like he's just making it up as he's going along. Yeah, there were horses and blood, and there was this stuff. Now that means this. It's just it's very difficult to take serious in a modern viewpoint, and I whereas getting into that mindset of people actually believing it is harder.
But anyway, Doomsday is great always.
Oh yeah, and you get all sorts in Doomsday as well. They're quite varied. Anyway, I'm going to have to wrap the session up because we've been here for a very long time. Thank you very much, everyone. This week went a bit wrong, so we had to cram 2 sessions into one, but we managed it. We managed it in the end. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.